Welcome to the Nourishment Mindset podcast, your guide to good food, good health, and a good life. And now, here's your host, Nutrition Network advisor and author of the Nourishment Mindset, Dixie Huey.
Happy Transformation Tuesday, y'all. Welcome to or back to the Nourishment Mindset podcast, where we are on a metabolic mission to help you achieve vitality and reverse chronic lifestyle conditions using real whole food, straight talk, and the pleasures of the table. Today, I am welcoming a special guest to the show. Before I get into that, I would like to remind you that I have my book for sale. It is on Amazon. It is also called The Nourishment Mindset. Or if you'd like a complimentary signed and shipped copy, you can buy that on my website, favorfat.com. So today we are going to be talking about sugar. And I have a special guest, and we're going to dive right in. All right, folks. So I told you I have a special guest today. This here is Mr. Michael Collins. And if you're watching us on YouTube, you see that he is the sugar-free man. Welcome to the Nourishment Mindset, Michael.
Dixie, thanks for having me. It's an honor. I appreciate it.
Yes. Well, let's get right into it. My listeners know I'm all about straight talk. Don't mince words. We can have fun while doing it. But tell me something. Is sugar something to which we can truly be addicted? When we think of addiction in the terms, like a lot of people would think of alcohol or other illegal or maybe in some states not illegal substances.
Right. No, it's a great question, a fair question in today's atmosphere for sure. So look, I mean, in a couple of months, I'll be sober for 40 years. And I help drug addicts and alcoholics get sober for 20 of those years. And in the last 12, I've been working with sugar addicts. And in the beginning, I wouldn't have believed that the parallels would be so identical. But they are. They're identical. I mean, in the last 3 years of doing these Quit Sugar Summits that we do, the science has exploded. There's a new paper every day about the biochemical brain addiction to sugar, basically dopamine dysregulation, which is, what runs pretty much all addictive behaviors, whether it's sex or gambling or alcohol or drugs, it doesn't matter. It's a way to use your, 10 million years of evolution to tamp down emotional feelings without actually having the feelings or working through them. You don't have to, because you have adapted this method of coping, of self-soothing with a substance, right? And I think the discrepancy or the misunderstanding, maybe not the yet development, like cigarettes, you can give this product to a baby and no one's going to be upset yet. But now, if you're kind of on my side of the fence for 12 years, you would see that the addiction, the biochemical addiction, is real, and that people, like just as an example, 20% of the people that call me for coaching are crying. They've never told another soul about these things they think I've never heard of before, that they're taking stuff out of the garbage or they're going out in a snowstorm to buy ice cream. They think that they're alone, that this is so abnormal, but it's very normal, right? And everyone is brainwashed by the diet industry. Eat less, exercise more. They want a food plan and an exercise plan when they come to me, which has nothing to do with what the work we do, because it's in essence an addiction recovery program. And this idea that it can't be as powerful as drugs or alcohol is ridiculous. I mean, the dose makes the poison, right? We take a little heroin, a little cocaine, a little alcohol. We are pounding 30 teaspoons plus. That's just average. And anybody with a bigger habit is 40, 50 teaspoons of sugar a day. People come to me, have never in their life, no exaggeration, gone 1 or 2 days without sugar, right?
Wow.
So what does this do to the brain? We know what it does to the brain. We have the MRIs to prove it. So I don't mean to be, I don't know, a fanatic. People accuse me of being a fanatic because there's it's so much disinformation about sugar that they don't really understand the advancements in science because nobody's paying any attention to it. But it's there if you look it up.
Well, and something you said about, the folks going out maybe in the blizzard or
Yeah,
digging through the trash, that's the compulsion piece.
yeah,
Having been someone who in my teen years had a severe eating disorder,
okay,
um, the compulsion piece is, for me, at least in my experience, that was a huge part of the eating disorder,
yeah,
which is not, I'm not suggesting that it's like an addiction, but you do become addicted to the behaviors that you're doing that perpetuate the eating disorder. So in my situation, I wasn't driving through a blizzard to get sugar. It was way sadder than that. I think I was like driving to the store to steal laxatives uh, to purge. Uh,
yes, yes,
and
yes,
the main point is that you've got these behaviors that are robbing you of your vitality. So
yeah.
very interesting. So talk to us about the physiological effects of sugar on the brain and body. Let's just go there. You said we've got the MRIs to prove it. So what are you seeing?
Well, look, I mean, most come to us for weight loss, right? And that's kind of for decades, they've tried to quit sugar, and they've narrowed it down. Strangely enough, my clients are women between 40 and 90, right? For years, I like to say that, but it's probably 50 and 90, premenopausal or menopausal women. And they've struggled for decades trying to body image, diet, whatever. And they've narrowed it down that sugar is the answer. Sugar is what their Achilles heel, the thing that they can't seem to put down or beat, right? And every diet's told them to quit the white stuff. So here's people, when they do get success with us, have lost 100 pounds, put type 2 in remission, whatever, but they're most happy that their brain came back online, their
Mm,
focus came back, their memory came back, their anxiety was less, right? This is what, even if they've lost 100 pounds, they're just so happy to be able to think clearly again. And I think it denotes and is a signal that, as I mentioned when I first talked about the addiction part, is that this is truly a dopamine dysregulation problem. Now, when I use the term dopamine, I mean dopamine, serotonin, norepinephrine, GABA, oxytocin, adrenal glands, endorphins, cannabinoid receptors. Every brain and body reward chemical in the body is affected by sugar in one way or another, right? And so this kind of this moniker of addiction is misunderstood, right? And we're at a place in history which was a perfect storm where the marketers for 100 years or more, the slavery and the lowering of the price of sugar has built it into the culture before the science caught up with it, similar to nicotine and tobacco. And here we are at after 40 years of high fructose corn syrup in the food system. When you and I were younger, there weren't that many obese people in high school. You know what I mean? It's like there was almost none. And now it's 30+% of high schools and colleges, it's even more. And so the idea that this is really an addiction, this is really I don't want to say a mental issue, but it's a substance that attacks or moderate it's working on the brain reward system. You don't want a sweet taste on your tongue when you feel the desire for sugar or sweet. What you're looking for is a dopamine hit, just a little respite from your natural life of worry and fear and anxiety, whatever it is. And you learn this very young. And your mother was probably uh, complicit in this, in that, you were busy. She was busy and you were upset, and she didn't get down and give you a hug. She gave you a cookie, hint you to the TV, and all of a sudden your little brain has not only the biochemical reward that you got, but the memory that you got was, I can relieve being upset by sugar. And so this goes all the way through life, right? So, I mean, I don't know. Sometimes it takes the arc of a podcast like this for me to transmit, a decade's worth of knowledge and working with thousands of people into having people understand that this is affecting the rewards that they have, that took millions of years to evolve to chase food and sex. And now we can hack that system by sitting on the couch eating a substance. You know what I mean? And the science is there. I mean, the experts on my summits can prove it. I mean, I'm not the scientist. I'm the kind of media guy to get the information out who just happens to be a sugar addict.
Right. Oh,
So it's a topic near and dear to my heart.
well, it's having been there, that's why I have a special place in my heart and in my practice for people who are struggling with disordered eating, because I know that it feels like a jail. And I wonder, some of what you've described with the sugar seems similar. Let's talk about signs that you might be addicted to sugar. So maybe someone hearing this is thinking, well, do I have a problem with sugar? And on top of that, I would pose a second question. Are there some people who might be able to have a treat every now and again, and sugar doesn't have this thing for me? So I feel like I'm one of those people, but am I addicted to sugar because I had a treat last night at my kid's birthday?
Right. No, that's it. And that is, it's an analogy, but I think it's fair. So when someone used to come to me and still does occasionally, but that wants to quit drinking, what they want to do is they don't really want to quit drinking. They just want to learn to drink normally. Okay. They just don't want to have the problems that they had when drinking. And so the same thing applies here. Look, if you're, here's the numbers. I was a chairman of the Food Addiction Institute, right? And MDs, PhDs, people that have been working on now in a work group trying to get this sugar addiction into the ICD-10 and the DSM, right? These are folks that have been around this for 20 years, right? And have treated it like addiction and worked in treatment centers and such. And here's the numbers. So about a third of people biochemically cannot ingest sugar. Like when they ingest sugar, it sets up cravings for more sugar and they can't stop. It feels compulsive, right? And then about a third of people are what we call harmful users. And harmful users, because of the food system that we have, where 80% plus of the food has sugar in it, I call it a push alcoholic or a push sugar addict. They have just been inundated. Their system has been inundated. It sets up cravings for, the sweeter stuff. But really, with a bit of abstinence, a little break, a little respite, those folks can actually maybe go back to normal, quasi-normal use, maybe reduced use. And then there's a third of people who we all hate. No, just kidding. They're, they could take it or leave it. They could eat one brownie and not eat half a brownie and leave it on the thing, and won't be another month before they have another one, And so, and these numbers track pretty good with the obesity numbers, right? Like a third obese, a third overweight, and a third of quote unquote normal size. Now, that said, you can be a very thin sugar addict. Okay. It's very possible to be a sugar addict and be very thin. So weight is just it just happens that they happen to match these. And it's not my job to say someone's a sugar addict. They have to make that, but most people who are obese, in my opinion, this is only my opinion, because you can be metabolically healthy and be in a bigger body, are addicted to sugar and flour when that seems to be when they let it go, the weight lets go as well. You know what I mean? 100%. And we're not here to get into the healthy at any size stuff, but just as experience, I've seen this over and over again,
Yep. It's in my practice, people, and I'm sure you see this, there's so much shame.
Yeah.
around this. And I try to educate people, and I do get mad about it, but I'm thinking of, like, you're saying that you work with a lot of perimenopausal, menopausal, and after women. You know,
Yeah.
these are the same people who were told to avoid dietary fat like the plague. And in my own life, when I started adding in natural fat and not fearing animal foods, that's when I saw my interest in sugar essentially evaporate. So I like
Um,
with people to think about nutrients, right? So maybe you're
mhm.
craving, and so I'm interested in how you see it, because I'll talk to people and I'll say, well, you know, maybe you're craving sugar because you're hungry. Maybe you're craving sugar because you're deficient in certain fat soluble vitamins, minerals, that sort of thing. Like, instead of thinking, because these are the same women that think of food as calories, they're not really thinking of
Mhm.
nutrients, right? And so if I use that, you know, pair of lenses, if you will, to talk about food and eating, and of course, nourishment, that's an important word to me. That, I think, for some people, they can get it, right? But that's not going to be the same as someone who is addicted to sugar and really has this like compulsion and shame and all of that. But do you find that in your practice? Do you help people try to shift to quote real food as part of,
Mm.
you know, tell us about your
Yeah, no, I mean, you mentioned
approach.
two ingredients to the recovery or the change or the transformation process, basically, which is shame and whole food, really. I mean, it's all, yes, we have to get you detoxed. It's important because there are real withdrawals, okay?
Mm,
And there's a long list of them, and they look like the keto flu. They look like uh, you know, hypoglycemia. They're really sugar withdrawals, period. They look like candida, everybody's got different names for it, but at the end of the day, it's just
okay.
sugar addiction, period. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. I interviewed Elaine Lane one time. She's Jack Lane's wife. She's 98 years old. She said, Jack blames sugar for everything, right? And it's true. After doing this for a decade, it's like sugar is causing every freaking malady, mental and physical, right? And it's also causing the shame that you talked about. Like, people can't get it. It's like their brain won't get wrapped around this idea that they're a doctor, they're a lawyer, they're a therapist, they're a business person, they're very successful in their life, they're a good mom, their life is good, but this little thing, this little white powder, seems to be their Achilles heel, seems to be the thing they can't stop doing, right? And a lot of it comes down to this is where the shame comes in, right? And this is where the evolution of a child, what we talked about before, a child self-soothing, literally outsourcing their emotional life to a substance, right? It's a very common construct in the world of alcohol and drugs. If you started using alcohol and drugs at 14 or 15, you stop growing emotionally. So extrapolate that backwards to 4 or 5 years old, probably in the womb, but 4 or 5 years old. And so now you're dealing with um, uh, a brand new world. So you let go of the sugar, and then all of a sudden, all of these feelings start to bubble up, and you're like, what the hell is going on? I mean, commonly they're like, Mike, I'm losing my mind, because they've never gone 2 or 3 full days without this self-soothing from a substance, right? And so, yeah, I mean, you got to eat whole foods so that you can start to feel that and do that work. So at the end of the day, you can do talk therapy all you want, but you're undoing it on the 7-Eleven on the way home because you're not processing all the way through it. A mother dies or a divorce happens or something that doesn't just go away in an hour, 50-minute session. No matter how many times you do it over and over, if you're going to 7-Eleven and stopping that progression of that emotional work, moving it through the whole arc of the grieving or whatever it is, and so if people don't want this depth, like I say, the arc of a podcast, they don't want the depth of what I'm explaining. They just want a food plan and an exercise plan because they've been brainwashed by the diet industry to eat less and exercise more. It's not. You mentioned this, what did you say? I forget what you said, but it's like calories, like they're thinking they're not burning enough calories, which has been debunked. It's not true. It's a chemical reaction in your body that these foods are creating, you know? And just as a side note, you were talking about moving more towards animal products. In the early days, I didn't want to define a diet, but I'm very close to saying I got contemporaries who will not work with vegetarians, okay? Because they are not getting the proper nutrition that they need in their belief for the metabolic, what does she call it? The metabolic um, repair that they need in their brain circuits, the fat and cholesterol for their receptors. In scientific terms, sugar addiction is dopamine receptors that are down regulated. They're thinned out. You have less of them, right? Now, it's not proven very well that they actually regenerate, but it is very well proven that you can create new ones. All right. And you can build a new neural pathway. The old neural pathway's got to be shut down, cemented over, closed down. That don't work no more. We got to go to the new one, which is built on no sugar, with abstinence from sugar, new self-soothing methods of yoga, exercise, massage, walking, running, making love, hugging, making good food. There's a lot of ways to self-soothe that don't include a substance, right?
I
So
was
yeah.
going to ask,
Uh-huh.
you're building these new neural pathways, but we've
Correct.
taken away the self-soothing. So I was going to ask, do you recommend X or Y to build that new pathway? So it sounds like, yes, that's part of the.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely part of the practice. I mean, it's probably the most important part of the practice. First of all, it's getting them to understand this is what's happening. It's not the sweet taste on your tongue. It's the subtle, and one of the biggest thought problems I have are both uh, cravings and denial, right? These are two symptoms of addiction, but cravings is how in God's name do people like make the I don't think when people finally get to my doorstep, they have the rational capacity to make the decisions they need to think positively about their health and weight and life. And I know this because people tell me five months later that they can't believe that they thought these things, because what they were really reacting to was not the food, the sweet taste on the tongue. They were reacting to, how do I feel just a little bit better for about 20 minutes before I have to re-ingest? And I don't have time to go for a run, and I don't have time to go to yoga or whatever. You know what I mean? And so it's this connection, these connections that they need to make. Most people know about all the things that you and I are talking about, but they haven't really put them together in the same way. You know what I'm saying? And so I think my job is to put them together in that way, you know? So I appreciate you having me on.
Thank you. This is
Yeah.
important information. So I would love to hear more about your journey. I'm calling you Monsieur Sugar Detox. So how did you experience the cookie with the skin knee, or
Oh my
realize
God.
you were addicted to sugar?
This actually starts another generation back. So my mother, my grandmother, my mother's mother died when she was only 8 years old. And it was, just terrible. I mean, she was the youngest and her mother was not that much older, but she died pretty young, only 48.
Mm.
But they lived out in the country and they had to move in with my great aunt. My grandfather and her moved. They were the last kid. She was the last kid. But they owned the whole corners, the whole four corners. They owned a country store across the way. And my grandfather made a deal with his cousin Jim that anytime my mother walked into that store to give her anything she wanted, to put it on his tab, which translated to candy, right? So
Or
she is like literally, and it was a wonderful thing to do to a child, for a child, but it ingrained in her brain that sugar was love and candy was love, And I grew up that way, okay? Covered up in candy and sugar and whatever, and cookies and just over and over, you know what I mean? Um, so, fast forward, I got sober at 28 and I wanted to get healthy. And this stuff started to look like my drugs and alcohol because I was a little obsessed with it. I was drinking 8 Mountain Dews a day and, candy and pasta. Really, I wasn't eating any real food. It was all ultra processed carbs and sugar. And I got adult acne and rosacea and, it just all kind of like, it wasn't good. Right. And so I had a regular life, a regular career, but I did read a book called Sugar Blues by a guy named William Duffy. And William, you know the book? Yeah.
I
So,
do. I've had two other guests have mentioned sugar blues. So
I mean, Sugar Blues is, I think it started a lot of people. Um, and Duffy was married to Gloria Swanson, the famous movie star. And they promoted that book pretty heavily in the late 70s, early 80s. And so I read the book and I was wanting to get healthy anyway. And so, it took me a while, by myself and, even my contemporaries in addiction recovery were not into this at all. They were like, shut up. We don't want to hear about it. And so it took a while, but I finally did it. Then I raised 2 sugar-free kids from the womb until they were 6 years old, right? How I talked my ex into doing that, I have no idea. Like it worked. And so
this culture, that's a miracle.
that was many, many years ago. And it was like a fight with the grandparents and the schools and everybody was like, thought we deprived them of a childhood, right? And so anyway, they said, Dad, you should write a book. Because obviously their childhood was very different. Like they did have it at that one birthday party, but then they never had it at home. And they outside birthday parties, they got to have sugar. But still, their life was very different. And so I did in 2018, and they did okay, but it wasn't until like I was kind of semi-retired and the pandemic, I was already kind of set up for this, and the pandemic hit. We already had support meetings online and coaching and everything, and it just freaking went nuts. I was like, what the hell? I was buried. And it's been like that ever since because, in the pandemic, people were all at home and baking and, selling the place out of sugar. And so sometime in that process during the pandemic, I picked up the sugar-free man thing, and it's been like that from social from now on. That's basically the short version. Probably brings up more questions than it answers. But.
No, well, it's the truth. So, tell us about sort of more about your program in detail. So say I'm not quite 50, but I'm this 50-year-old woman. I'm calling you, I'm crying, I'm eating out of the trash can late at night and going in blizzards to get ice cream.
Yeah.
What is my journey going to look like through your program? I've admitted that I have an issue. So what's the next step?
No, that's good. That's good. It's so look, first of all, you're not alone. That would be the first thing I would tell you. It's like, you're not alone. It's a very common phenomena. Obviously, with at least 2/3 of the population has some issue with this. And the second part is like, I've got to move you out of the diet industry. I've got to move you into the addiction recovery. And I've got to convince you, my kind of standard protocol is I want to show someone 90 days of abstinence from sugar, flour, and in my program, caffeine. It's a long story. I can tell it if you want. But like anything that's going to be affecting your dopamine that we discussed in your brain reward chemicals, right? And so we created a 30-day challenge, which is I had to do it. I'm on my 4th iteration of this thing because we keep learning more. But this is me coming into your inbox every day. But we also have support meetings online 4 times a day, Zoom meetings at all different times, so you can choose your own time. And you join a community of people who are doing the same thing. Look, 80% of our folks do not even have spousal support. They've had so many diet plans in the home that the husband's like, enough, I'm done. Like, don't change our food. I'm not changing. I'll be cooking or whatever. And so they've got to, get into a different group who believes this, right? And dare I say, it is the most loving community on the planet because they all been there. They've experienced everything you're going through. And when they when somebody drops in there, there's like a big sigh of relief, like, oh my God, like finally, like I'm not crazy and other people are going through the same stuff. And yes, quote unquote, we have to get you detox. You have to get off the stuff. And the withdrawals suck. You're irritable, you're hungry, you're lethargic, you got headaches, you got night sweats, you get rashes, you get weird stuff happening, right? But that only lasts for about 30 days, less sometimes, and goes away. The more important part is that what we mentioned earlier is you now no longer have this crutch to outsource your emotions to. You've got to start dealing with this stuff. And that's kind of where the community comes in, the coaching, the facilitators come in. And so we start to help walk you through these things. And most meetings, yeah, we'll answer questions in the beginning, but we have a second level where I actually facilitate a couple meetings. That's really, in essence, if I had to name it, it's a codependency recovery program, right? It's a way for people to talk about their husband or talk about their job or talk about their kids and their frustrations so they don't have to go use and numb out, right? And then once they have an outlet like that, I mean, it's the only thing that's ever worked in drug and alcohol stuff. It even works in cancer. Like if someone joins a cancer survivors group, their percentage of long-term recovery goes through the roof compared to someone who tries to go it alone, And when people accept that and this is the reason Weight Watchers worked and Jenny Craig worked, it's not because of the food they sold you or the points or anything like that. It was because good meetings, good facilitators, good groups of people that got tight were, they were living life together and they could talk openly about something that people don't want to talk openly about, weight and food and dieting and all, exercise and like that. So that's the long and the short of it. I mean, again, there's a lot of nuance to it and there's a lot of other stuff, but that's basically how it works, And I think it's the only way that works. It's the only way I've seen work. You know the numbers just as well as I do. 95% of all people who lose any amount of weight gain it all back in the first year. And then some, they add some. And that's very easy to explain under the paradigm that I've, in this arc of the podcast, have kind of told you about, is that when you start, say it's the first of the year, things good, money's good, relationships are good, job's good, you lose 40 pounds, it's June, and you say to yourself, I might and then something happens, like a relationship or a financial or whatever. And you say, I'm at the wedding, I got to have a piece of cake. It's okay. If I heard that story once with different variations, I've heard it thousands of times. And then people go off and then they don't come back for months. And then
this time it will be different. Yeah.
They've gained the 40 pounds back and then some. And they're like, exhausted again. And then they want to start again, which is cool. I don't mind. It depends where you're ready. People are ready at different times, right? And so, yeah, I mean, at this juncture, it's just pattern recognition. It's just pattern recognition. It's like I've seen it so many times over and over and over again that I can pretty much down to the day tell you, you're going to have headaches this day, you're going to be irritable this day, you're going to have night sweats that day, and I can get you through the detox. It's whether or not you want to do the work past day 30, because it's day 30 to 90 is where the rubber meets the road kind of thing,
Right. Well, but I'm guessing too, some of the benefits become apparent after you get through that muddy period. Yeah. But yes, making that connection and having this supportive community.
Yeah.
It will. And for me, in my own experience with an eating disorder, it wasn't, I would say I no longer had my eating disorder. I was competing as a triathlete, but I still had disordered eating thinking. And
yeah, for sure.
This pattern thing, I would say I probably stopped all the actual disordered eating. Let's just call it 20. But even at 25, I remember this light bulb went off for me, and it really changed everything. It didn't mean that it was perfect going forward, but I had been broken up with by this gentleman. And I woke up the next day after crying myself to sleep, and I felt fat.
Mm.
Felt fat, right? And I thought, oh gosh, I've got this meeting, these black pants, they're not going to forget, San Francisco girl, da, da, da. Put on the pants fit fine, and it went ding, ding, ding. I don't feel, my word fat really means I feel sad. And that's the whole, and
Mm.
everything came into play for me. Oh, okay. I started having the eating disorder issue when my parents were getting divorced. So if I were fat, it's easy to fix that. You just starve yourself and develop an eating disorder. But sad's harder to fix. It's kind of just got to wait sad out and do the work, as you say, and sit with it. It's uncomfortable. It's very uncomfortable. And so that for me, when you were talking about people recognizing the pattern, once you understand that about yourself, that you're using this instead of confronting feelings that no one wants to feel, then hopefully you can create those new neuropathways. And it's interesting to me because it's parallel to my own experience. So I took a quiz on your website that I love.
Okay. Before you go there,
Okay.
I want you to repeat this because I'm stealing it, just so you know, and it'll be on social
Fine.
media later today. My word fat means sad. Like, can you like flesh that out a little bit for me?
Sure. So it just occurred to me, here I am. I'm a triathlete. I'm not fat. I hadn't felt fat. See, people with eating disorders feel fat
Yeah.
because, as I said, if you feel fat, then you just starve yourself so you can deal with it, right? It's just,
Yeah.
it's math. Not that it's that simple, but that's the brain of someone in the middle of an eating disorder is a wackadoodle doodle territory. So
Yeah.
I woke up that morning, I hadn't felt fat in years. And so
Yeah.
I woke up and all of a sudden I'm feeling fat. Why would I be feeling fat? And what does that even mean?
Right.
I
Right.
mean, straight talker and me is like you either are fat or you're not fat. But
Right.
feeling fat, what is that? That's feeling emotions that are negative. So in my case, at that one time, I was feeling unloved, maybe abandoned, shocked that I had been broken up with. I thought the relationship was going well. So all of the feelings when a relationship ends, I guess it was that brain wiring. I'll call it brain wiring. You called it neural pathways, but
So how did you make the jump from this was fat to I'm sad? Like how did was it a conscious thing that
it
you
was
got a
literally the black pants because I knew what I wanted to wear to this meeting. And it's,
yeah.
that's women for you. You wake up, maybe maybe you don't, but I had planned this out and I was terrified. My pants aren't going to fit. What am I going to do? Which
Right.
doesn't make any sense. They fit last week. Why would they not fit today?
Yeah, yeah.
And so I realized, like, wait a minute, you're being very strange. This is not rational thought. And that's when it dawned on me is when I zipped the pants up and was like, oh, like I'm not fat. Why did I wake up feeling fat? And that's when it clicked in my brain, if you will. Oh, I'm not really feeling fat. I'm feeling sad and unloved.
That's a really poignant and it's a really good analogy. I don't know what it is, a good way to describe what I just said. That's good. I really like it. That's
Thank
cool.
you. You feel free to use it. So
Right.
make it to turn it into something that it could be turned into a question for someone. So pausing, because I work with a lot of clients in my private practice and at a previous job, our patients, and
Yeah.
I'm always trying to encourage people to hit the pause button. So I'm not telling them like, you're not allowed to eat this or do that. I mean, as you know, that's got to come from within. But I will say, can we hit the pause button next time you want whatever it is? Everyone has their thing that's their go-to for whatever reason when they're feeling low and they're getting off track. Just hit the pause button for a moment. Not that that's easy. That's probably the hardest part. But you don't even have to say to yourself, I can't have it. Just say, I'm going to take 5 or 10 minutes and I'm going to sit quietly. And what is it that's preceding this desire? Can I think about that?
Yeah.
And not that would solve everything, but for some people, just buying time to cut that brain wiring and people will, I mean, this is not new. Go for a walk, listen to music, call a friend, all of those things. But sometimes people, they're standing in front of the fridge, like they're right there. I call
We
it
have people ask the question and call themselves dear. What do I really need, dear? They sit
compassion.
down,
Wow. Self-compassion.
They're like, sit down, take a couple deep breaths and say, I don't really want the cookies. Well, what do I really want?
Right.
And then sometimes the feeling will come. It's practice. This is the work, quote unquote. The work is not exercise or great shopping or diet, food plans or whatever. The work is what you just described. Yeah, it's like working through not using a substance to help assuage any worries, fears, guilt, or whatever, or pain or whatever. And hopefully it's not like capital T sexual or physical abuse that's coming up or whatever. A lot of times it's just handling everyday life.
Capital T as in trauma.
Yeah, exactly.
I like that. Not that that's a great thing, but just name it to tame it. Right.
Yeah, I mean, like God forbid anybody, sexually abused or was, physically abused or whatever. But it could have been your boyfriend broke up with you, like like you didn't handle it well. You just ate. When was the last time you saw a movie where the boy broke up with the girl and they didn't have an ice cream party? You know what I mean? It's like it's like a cultural norm, literally.
It is a cultural norm, absolutely. But here's the funny thing: I hadn't done that.
Okay.
I hadn't
Well,
even
you ran.
bad.
You had running. You had triathlete.
Yes.
I got a coach. She still runs 100 miles a week. But when she came over here, she had 15 extra pounds. And she couldn't run it off. No running it off. Now her times she's in her 50s, now her times are better. And, it was the ultra processed carbs,
Oh, absolutely. Well, and that's I would love to go back in time. I did all the dumb stuff that endurance athletes are told to do. Drink the Gatorade, take the goo, carbo load. Oh, it's awful. You show up.
You said the goo is the worst thing.
Oh, it's awful. You show up on race day, you feel like shit.
Right.
I would love to go back in time as sort of a ketovore type, whatever, I don't necessarily need labels, but I focus on nutrient-rich foods, and I certainly do not avoid animal foods. I prioritize them at every meal, but I would like to take that approach to nutrition back in time 20 years. If I was good then, dang, and I would have felt good on the starting line. It's just it's a whole industry for athletes. It's just sugar for athletes. And boy, is it expensive.
Yeah. Have you ever heard the Dr. Tim Noakes story?
Oh, absolutely. I did my nutrition training through his nutrition network, and Dr. Noakes trained Sami Inikin, who founded Virta, that's the company I work for, to reverse.
You worked for Virta, huh?
I did for 3 years. But he trained him and Sami to raise awareness, worked with Dr. Noakes to row from San Francisco to Hawaii without carbs. It's a stunt. It's a great stunt, and he's an amazing athlete. But yes, so Dr. Noakes, love this man.
Yes, I love that guy.
Yeah.
He's the nicest guy. I've probably interviewed him 3 or 4 times. I love that guy. He's the nicest guy.
That's great.
I can't get him anymore. He got so big that the groups got so big they send me a subordinate or whatever.
Right. Well, he's got some great subordinates. I had a wonderful experience so they started the nutrition network, and it was only for practitioners. And I remember emailing with them and begging my way in, and they're going, "Who is this woman with a wine business?" No, you're not a doctor, you're not a nurse. They said, but we are thinking of opening up a pathway for non-medical professionals. When they did, I jumped at the chance, and I did all my training through them. It was wonderful. And now I'm in the process of actually, once you get through that hurdle, then you can do the practitioner training. So I still have a lot of work to do, but don't we all? It's always all the time.
Well, you're on the right track. That's a great group. They really are.
I agree. So let's talk about one more little bit on disordered eating, just because it's a fascination of mine. How many or what percentage of people that come to you would you say they have like an actual eating disorder versus they just need to cut sugar out and find a new soothing mechanism?
Okay, so look, I just got off literally like it ended about the time yours turned on with a woman called Dr. Kim Dennis out of SunCloud Health in Chicago, and she's going to be on our summit. And her and a guy named David Wiss
Mhm.
are talking about the nuances of eating disorder versus addiction, versus food addiction or sugar addiction. Food addiction is really a misnomer in a lot of ways. And this intersection that I think Kim definitely has probably the most advanced, like she's got 6 treatment centers in the Chicagoland area,
Hmm.
as she has the most depth of understanding that the two go together. What's happened over the years is that eating disorder specialists, people in the world of bulimia and binge eating, we stay as far away as we can from anorexia. It's completely different. But binge eating and bulimia, uh, there is a rule that all foods fit, that if you demonize sugar or flour and you can't eat it in moderation, then you're not well, okay? Which is just not true. In
I
my
agree.
experience, it's just not true. I've had a lot of people who have been through treatment centers, who've gotten bariatric surgery, had a lot of different quote unquote, workarounds or healing modalities. And when they finally got abstinent from sugar and flour, their stuff healed. They healed. And they began the process that we've been talking about, where they started to, work through their issues as opposed to trying to avoid them and whatever, cut their stomach or whatever. And I don't say that with a judgment. I say it with, because I've had so many bariatric patients who, figured out that they could drink their sugar, right, or whatever. And so,
Starbucks coffee line around the block every morning.
exactly. So so anyway, I don't want to say contentious, but it is. It's a contentious and nuanced topic when you try to intersect the old world of uh, eating disorder treatment centers with this addiction. Right now, it's not in the DSM. It's not in the World Health. There's work groups for both, trying to get the sugar addiction or food addiction, whatever. It's likely going to be called ultra processed food use disorder, or
Oh
ultra
my.
processed food use disorder, because use disorder, you can't call anything addiction anymore. The government websites have been scrubbed of this and everything. You can't call it that anymore. So it'll be a use disorder, but what the ultimate front end of the name will be, I don't know. No one will know until it happens. But anyway, the people that I've been interviewing on my summits and been interacting with for a decade, it's a real thing. Addiction to sugar is real. It's debilitating. It will kill you slowly, not, like alcohol or drugs. I mean, alcohol can be pretty slow too, but it truly is an addiction. And you've got to kind of understand this nuanced difference between eating disorders and sugar, or, ultra processed carbohydrate addiction. And so it's not easy to describe. And I get a lot of blowback. I was telling Kim that, you know, I used to own bingeeating.com and I sold it, but I used to get a lot of hate from people when I would cross post for sugar addiction. They're
Hmm.
like, you can't eliminate one food. And I'm like, shut up, you're wrong. They are wrong. In my opinion, and this is only my opinion, don't send me any emails. They're wrong.
Arguments.
They're wrong. This isn't a true addiction like any substance use disorder, period, end of story. I've seen it thousands and thousands of times. It's just an addiction. I don't want to say just, because it's an addiction, but it is not, as they describe, an eating disorder that needs to be healed by moderation with these products, right?
And for a
And
lot
the
of
last
people,
question I asked Dr. Kim was, do you believe that sugar is a drug or a food stuff? And she said, it's unequivocally a psychoactive drug. The question is like, how much? Like the discrepancy is how much are people, um, how much is it affecting them? Like a drug, like an alcohol or an opioid or whatever.
consequences.
And I think if you look at what happened since high fructose corn syrup came into the diet in the 80s, and the obesity rate since then. And then when you start to see from my side of the fence, the addiction and the addiction recovery required, it's pretty simple. But again, arc of a podcast to get all of it out so that someone who is open-minded can listen and is willing to act on it in a different way. It's not a diet. Likely, it could not even be an eating disorder. It's just again, I use that word, but it is an addiction to sugar and flour.
Yep. And they certainly intersect, and
Yeah.
you know this, but it's just worth stating. When I was failing at anorexia, because my body was trying, the body's a wonderful thing. It wants nutrients. I never binged on filet mignon, nor eggs.
Right.
It was always ultra processed food.
Yeah,
Always.
always. And I find that too, though, and I want to get some grad students in here to kind of do this, but 85% of people don't need to weigh and measure. And when they get abstinent, their binge eating goes away and their bulimia goes away. Now, 15% of people genuinely are volume eaters, and they can overeat like whatever, steak and broccoli, doesn't matter. They can overeat and use that stomach receptor, that stretch receptor that was evolutionary, that, if you got a lot of food one day, you should eat it all because you might not get any for 2 or 3 days. So they use that to hack their dopamine system. But it's the same thing. It's the same thing as being addicted to anything. You're hacking your dopamine. And there's a different way to hack your dopamine. That's volume eating, right? It's not necessarily the actual substance itself that affects the nucleus accumbens. So yeah, it's interesting. I mean, it's fascinating to me. I'm weird, but
Well, all the best people are weird. So
yeah, it's true. Stay weird.
Stay weird. I used to live in the Portland area. The bumper stickers were "Keep Portland Weird."
Yeah,
I don't
love
think
it.
Portland has any chance of becoming not weird. So that's part of its charm. So I'm curious, what would you say is the most interesting or thought-provoking memory or instance that you've had since getting into this space?
Wow, what a great question. I've never been asked that question. It might take a minute here. Let
Take
me
your
have a sip of water on that. The most interesting.
And it could be, a patient story or a realization or.
Well, one of them is the one I was going to tell you about caffeine, because people always criticize me about the caffeine. So,
Well, let's get back there because I love my cup of coffee, and some days I'm crazy and I have two.
yeah, okay. So this is a good story for you.
If I have more, I shake though, so I can't have any more.
Right. So I'll start it out with wired together, fired together.
Okay.
So coffee, tea, chocolate, whatever. All these things are wired together at the same time. If you get one, your body's going, where is the other one? Same with sweeteners. Like people ask me about sweeteners, and they're like, it's the taste of the sweet that activates where's the calories? The body's saying, where's the rest of it? Where's the sugar? Where's the actual sugar?
Yes.
So I'm working with this Olympic athlete 6 years ago, 5, 6 years ago. And she actually won a bronze medal in the Olympics in swimming. Okay. And she's like, by this time she's 40 something. She's a chiropractor, and she's got a couple of kids, and her kids are starting to get into this stuff, right? Into the sugar, and she's still swimming. Weight was never an issue, And so I worked with her for like 3 or 4 months, and she couldn't get off the sugar. Now, this woman can do anything with her body.
Right,
Like,
bronze medal swimmer.
she won a bronze medal in the Olympics in swimming, and she could not quit sugar. And I'm like, I worked for another 3 months for no pay because first of all, I wanted a testimonial from an Olympian.
Oh, of course.
So and I'm like, I'm going to figure this out. So about 5 months in, we're like, I start doing these more audits. And she's talking about the coffee. I said, when did you start drinking coffee? And she said, I was 10. I said, 10? She says, yeah, the coaches used to give it to me for performance in the pool.
Mm-hmm.
So no child is drinking that without sugar. So here, her entirety of her, adult or her teenage years are spent, drinking coffee and sugar and swimming and just deeply rooting in her brain these neurochemicals that were affecting her performance and her emotions, come to find out. And she was having some family difficulties with a sister and some other stuff. And so she said, I said, you willing to quit the coffee? She said, yeah. So she tried it, and literally like 3 months later, she was off the sugar. But she did go through some emotional changes with this relationship with her sister and her kids and her husband. Some different stuff was going on, and the same thing that we've been talking about was with her. It was the coffee that was keeping the cravings alive. I use that phrase a lot, keeping the cravings alive for the sugar, because it was together, fired together,
And curiously, was she before she stopped using like non-nutritive faux sugar sweeteners in that coffee in place of sugar?
She drank it black.
Interesting. And that was still affecting the pathway. Okay.
Yep. Because she didn't want to use sugar. She didn't, she was really healthy in other ways, in the rest of her life. She was really healthy. But yeah, no, it's I have a Facebook group of about 600 or 800, I don't forget, but there's one big one that I got whacked from for something I must have put in there about sugar. I can't even find it anymore, but it's got 5,000 or 6,000 people in it, and there's a couple of Olympians in there. And there's a level of maturity in that group of people that have been years without the caffeine. And here's what happened. So, you ever heard this term anhedonia? So anhedonia is the inability to feel joy, right?
Oh,
so,
no.
Yeah. And caffeine withdrawals for a large majority of people, or a majority of people, is like a methamphetamine withdrawal, like speed withdrawals, cocaine withdrawals, or cocaine recovery is a lot of months of just not being able to feel anything joyful. You're just flat. And the caffeine is like that for some people. So when you combine that with the sugar withdrawals and the sugar, it's really a nasty 3 or 4 months. And in that one big Facebook group, and mine have come around, and and a lot of my coaches said, yeah, you're full of shit, Mike. They didn't want to listen to me. But now they've quit after a year or two, right? And the same thing kind of happens, with like a speed withdrawal. You just can't get happy for a while, and you want to use your drugs of choice, either sugar or caffeine. And so it takes a while, but every person, to a man, to a woman, every one of them, if they get through that initial, and some people it only lasts 30 days, or it's not even bad, but some people it's different. And so once they get through it, there's so much. The half-life of caffeine is 12 hours, and there's nobody that doesn't get better sleep after they're off of it. There's nobody that doesn't have lessened anxiety. It's a real phenomena, you know what I mean? And again, when we were talking about a psychoactive drug, yes, it's legal. Yes, it's, accepted worldwide, and anybody can get it, and you can drink Coca-Cola and eat chocolate. But at the end of the day, I think I've said this, but I forget which one I'm on half the time. But, this kind of, the brain comes back online. You're less anxiety, your memory comes back, your focus returns when you get off of these things, and you sleep better. So anyway, I didn't mean to get off on that, but people always wonder why I include caffeine in my recovery program.
Sounds like it works.
It does work. And it's so much faster than people. About 15% of people seem to be able to drink black coffee. But like I mentioned with the coaches experiment, the 3 or 4 coaches that they drank the black coffee and then got off of it, they wish they'd have done it earlier. So it's, yeah, I think you can tolerate it, but I still think it's in the long run, there's a lot of benefits conferred on abstinence from that too.
Well, no, I appreciate your saying that. I have to laugh though, because whenever I work with someone new, they know sugar's gotta go.
Everybody knows.
Everyone hears me say horrible things about seed oils, but I'll get questions like, "You're not going to take my caffeine away, are you?" It's like, all right.
All the time. Same thing. Your experience is showing, because that's exactly what happens to me. I'm not giving up my coffee.
That's right.
We have 1 cup in the morning. If I heard that, I only have 1 cup in the morning.
Well, that actually is me. I even can forget to drink coffee. So I'm just glad I don't have that. I have other issues, certainly, but that's just not one of them. But it sounds like it would be interesting. I did for a while switch to tea, like chamomile, and that's lovely. I love chamomile tea. I've talked about this tea. I wondered what you'd think of this. It's called Buddha tea. I was talking about it on my last podcast episode. I just picked it up. I found it at a Sprouts, which I don't know if Sprouts is in California, but it's
Yeah, they do.
okay, hippy dippy whole food type store.
Yeah.
And I thought, ooh, Buddha tea, CBD tea. I'm not really into CBD per se. I've interviewed someone about it who makes a beautiful CBD olive oil, and we had an interesting conversation, but I thought I'm just going to try this. And I slept like a dead person. I mean, I'm always up at 5:30. We've got stuff. We've got to get the kid to school, all this stuff. We overslept. I woke up and it was like too good of a night's sleep. So I thought, that was interesting. Does anyone, have you heard of the CBD tea, chamomile tea?
Yeah, I'm not a big fan. I mean,
that's in that same pile of.
It's on the same pile of like.
Okay.
Okay. Here's the thing. What I
Sure.
suggest. Here's what I suggest. Both with supplements, I'm working on this theory of, it's called supplement use disorder, and I'll tell you my quick story about. I'll tell you supplement use disorder in a second, because it's got a lot of ramifications of what we're talking about. So this one woman, she was like the star student, basically. She no flour, no sugar, right, and no coffee, but she was drinking licorice tea. I'm like,
oof.
So what I figured out is she like 4 or 5 times a day. She kept going, falling back to the sugar, falling back to the sugar, falling back. Come to find out, in essence, she was making her own high fructose corn syrup 4 times a day or 5 times a day.
Cool.
Because she's mixing hot water with, a plant that has a sugar base, or whatever. Anyway, I've seen it so many different iterations. Again, as I said, it's now pattern recognition. And the same thing with supplements. So another woman, she lost like 60 pounds, but she had another 50 or 60 to go. She was really doing well. But she stalled, just dead stop. And this went on for months. And I'm like, So we did another audit. We tried to figure it out. So she's had, no exaggeration, 30 different supplements that she had sourced from the internet. And she'd be like, well, what's this for? Well, it's collagen in my skin. What's this for? Well, it's for my joints or whatever. And it would go on and on. Like, you have a doctor prescribe any of this? And no. Like, I just read something and whatever. So she's like, I said, can you give them some of them up? Like, cut back or something? So she cut back like down to 10 or 11 or something like that.
Ooh,
And
still a lot of swallowing. Or were these gummies? I hate those gummies.
No, they're regular pills.
Okay.
Which is part of my theory, is like, when the weight loss began again, this has happened like 10 or 15 times now. The weight loss began again, the stall was broken. I think it was that the liver healed up quite a bit, flour and sugar at the beginning, and then it was still trying to process the capsules and the powders and stuff. I just don't think we were meant to eat that many powders. Like, you might get a little sand or dirt, but the system doesn't do that. It's got to I think it sees it as aliens, whatever. But the bottom line is when they stopped or cut way back, like the weight loss stall again started, right? And so I think that what I was going to say at the beginning of what you're talking about is with, your CDB or whatever, do this. And I beg people to do this. Give me 90 days of abstinence, of reset, no flour, no sugar, no caffeine, and cut back on the things that we've been talking about. And then try just one thing
At a time. Oh, yes.
one at a time, so you can get you can't try 30. You don't know what's going on. You just try one thing. If you want to try spelt flour or whatever you want to try one thing, see how it treats you. Because at that point, at least 90 days, hopefully, preferably 120 or 6 months, you will have healed up enough to see what the new thing brings. What does it bring? A rash? Does it bring like lethargy? Does it make you oversleep? What does it do? But people can't tell because they've been so long on this treadmill. I mean, one of the symptoms of diabetes is frequent urination because the body is working so hard to get the sugar out that it's like it doesn't have time to do all the other stuff, and it gets sequestered in the fat. And so when you start reducing the fat, you got another problem. The toxins get into your bloodstream, so it starts to get out. And you got to get through that process. You got to lose some of that weight before you get to some kind of homeostasis where you're just able to, see what a gummy would do, see what a spelt flour would do, see what new vitamins would do. So, and I've been accused of being a little bit, strict or whatever, but it's like the success stories kind of bear me out. They're like the people that paid attention, or at least they're willing to suspend judgment for a minute and to experiment with their body. I think the most important thing that I teach is called living in process, which is like an N1 experiment. I mean, I was able to use my own kids as a freaking experiment. I'm no problem using myself. And I was a vegetarian when I first started doing this stuff. And now I'm almost a full-blown carnivore because I'll try this. What the hell? Sounds good. Let's try it. And it works, But most people aren't willing. They've outsourced their health and their weight to gurus and doctors and prescriptions and whatever.
Precisely.
Yeah, they're not willing to use themselves as an experiment, see how it works, see how they feel, and then try the next thing, whatever.
Right. And the patience required to actually do an elimination protocol and then add back slowly, see how you feel. But that's how I discovered and then later verified with blood work, wheat allergy. It's not gluten intolerance. It's not that. It's like the histamine effect, horrible sneezing, itching. That's just wheat for me. I just can't do it. If I do it, I get the consequences and the inflammation. Yeah. So, but you have to go through that avoidance to then be able to add it back and then do your own detective work, so to speak. So,
and that's another thing is like, you need to be able to tap into how you're feeling. And I think how you're feeling has been obfuscated in a deep way by these, these legal drugs,
Yes.
You're not really in touch with your own biochemistry, your own feelings, your own how you feel, both physically, emotionally, and mentally,
Right. If you're always altered. I sometimes joke, so hang with me for a minute, because this is going to sound like the ultimate crazy lady. I joke that we need to bring back smoking, but don't mean cigarettes. I mean, think of smoking. What is it if you take the chemicals out? It's inhale, exhale. Inhale, I got to have a cigarette. I got to calm down. What are people doing as they're, quote, calming down with the cigarette? They're breathing. So if we can bring smoking without the substances, just the behavior of breath work.
I didn't know a lot about breath work till I did Kundalini. And even when I did it, I didn't really pay attention to the way they were doing it. it wasn't until recently that I started to really get into the breath stuff. And what you're saying makes a lot of sense that, yeah, you're breathing in a normal or a kind of a depth sequence but you just happen to be taking nicotine into.
Exactly, right? And the formaldehyde.
Doesn't sound crazy. These kinds of things don't sound crazy to me, Nixie.
Right.
They're
Well,
that,
it's
like,
one way to get someone's attention. Like, what's this health coach saying? Bring back smoking. But
right.
we like to try to have fun here with it too. So before I get to my final question, I would love to know where people can find you. Tell them where I found that quiz.
Yeah, sugaraddiction.com. And my line is like, if you get to sugaraddiction.com or you even type it in, you don't need to take the quiz. Like you already made you've already kind of like, tagged yourself.
So this is my husband. So he was in the Navy, and there's a expression that they use. If there is doubt, there is no doubt.
Right, exactly.
So I will say to someone as an example, because someone will say, well, what do you mean? And I'll say, okay, forgive me, but have you ever woken up and it's time to take the kid to school and said, should I be driving my car right now? No, because you haven't been drinking. But if you come out of a restaurant and you've had a couple glasses of wine and you have to ask yourself if you should be driving, the fact that you're asking the question tells you the answer, right? So if you're on sugaraddiction.com, per your point, you've got the answer. So
You got just grab the book and just read it. It's free there.
that's awesome. Well, that's wonderful. So in closing, I always
Also, I don't know when this will be airing, but we have a big event that's every year in January, this January 6th, called the Quit Sugar Summit.
Okay.
And we've got usually like 50 experts and just a lot of fun.
It will be before the summit. So that's great.
Perfect.
So as I always say, real whole foods, straight talk, pleasures of the table. So I like to end the podcast by asking those that I'm interviewing to please share with me a treasured tableside tradition. So mine is I just like eating with my family. That's the favorite part of my day. It's cheers at the table that we all do, and then talk about something that went well today, not use the table as a place to come and complain about, the guy who cut you off in traffic. But it can be a fun question because I hear all kinds of different answers. And my mission is to have people sit at a table and eat food.
That's a great mission.
Eat real food at a real table. So do you have a tableside tradition you'd like to share, Michael?
I do, but I don't get to do it as much as I'd like. So the strangest thing happened when my boys were young, like 8 or 9 years old. They started watching a chef called Alton Brown. You know that guy? Anyway, he's a famous television chef, right? And instead of cartoons or anything, sporting events, they would watch cooking shows, right? So now my boys, even though they have big jobs in other industries, they're amazing chefs, right? They're amazing cooks and chefs. And one of them has developed a holiday tradition. It's going to be Thanksgiving as we record this, and I'm going up there and they'll both be there to cook. So that's been it's weird. Like, I go to their places so that I can have them cook for me. I'll do the dishes. I'll buy the food. I don't care as long as you guys are cooking, So yeah, that's kind of a family tradition that's kind of evolved just in the weirdest way because they just liked cooking when they were young.
I love that they have maintained that.
Yeah, they're really into it. I mean, when I was up there last time, we walk out the front door and there is this gigantic box on the freaking driveway. And it's one of those smokers, like a
now you're talking.
Smoker. And we spent the thing assembling it and then breaking it in. So yeah, it's been amazing, really. So
that's wonderful. And it also it brings up something whenever I hear a client or even a neighbor say, I don't cook. I don't know how to cook. I don't like cooking. I think, oh boy, we have some nutrient deficiencies here.
Right.
Because what other animal on the planet doesn't bother with nourishing itself? Right? I don't eat. It's not a thing. That's the focus of, life is finding nourishment. It's a comment on our culture more than anything that would be a thing where I don't cook.
I find the same exact thing. You're exactly right. Like people come to me, they've never cooked. They out or they get takeaway or whatever. And that cooking becomes something they have to, I didn't want to throw this word in there, but grow up and learn. They have
Yes.
to. It's just part of it. You're never going to get to self-actualization, which in the meetings that I facilitate, it's no longer about food. It's about self-actualization.
There
It's
you go.
about how long can I live? How much quality can I have in my life? How can I avoid illness, or whatever. And
Vitality.
yeah, the vitality. I mean, I got 80-year-old women in some of my groups that are just like, you know, amazing. They've lost pounds and put stuff in remission and they want more, they want to live to be 100.
Well, that's definitely giving them years back. So
Yeah, for sure.
here, as we are in the holiday season,
Yeah.
that is something I'm sure that your members and clients are very grateful for. So thank you. We are grateful to have you on the Nourishment Mindset, Michael Collins, Mr. Sugar-Free Man. Have a
Thanks for
wonderful
having me.
time with your sons over the holidays, and santé to you, sir.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. You are, I'll beat this nicely, but you're far more advanced in your questions and understanding and acceptance than some of the podcasts that I go on that are fitness related, put it that way.
Right.
They're just not, some of the constructs that we covered they're not computing. I mean, I hang with it, but it just doesn't compute with them. You know what I mean?
Right. Well, the fitness industry, and I'm part of it. I teach fitness. I've done that for 30 years on and off, but
Right.
there's still a lot of people in front of those classes talking about how many calories we're going to burn today. And I'm like, can we stop with that crap? That is
Yeah,
not
exactly.
why we're here. We're here for joy.
Right.
And
Well,
and
thank you and keep up the great work.
thank you. I appreciate the compliment, and it's wonderful to meet you. Thank you for connecting with me.
You take care.
All right, y'all. I hope you enjoyed this episode 62 of the Nourishment Mindset podcast, where we are on a mission to help you reverse chronic lifestyle conditions and achieve vitality. I want you to feel amazing. So, in closing, remember, if you haven't bought my book, check it out on favorfat.com or Amazon. Find me on LinkedIn, Dixie Huey, or Instagram or YouTube, Nourishment Mindset. Feel free to suggest a topic or ask a listener question. Some of my best show ideas come from your questions, so I really, really appreciate it. And if you haven't yet posted a review on your favorite podcast platform, whether you're listening on Apple or Spotify or maybe directly in the Substack app, I would just be tickled pink if you would give me that gift this holiday season. And finally, if you're not a subscriber, you want to make sure to pop on over to favorfat.substack.com, because my newsletter will give you each month not only a synopsis of the pod, but also a fine read, a fine recipe, and a fine find. So go ahead and subscribe if you haven't yet. And until next time, wishing you a warm and nourishing, delicious Thanksgiving, y'all. Bye-bye.